Hey up everybody and welcome back to my channel. I all hope you're having a smashing day, night, evening, whatever it may be, wherever you are in the world. It's currently Saturday evening here at the moment. And I also hope that you're all having a fun weekend with it being the first round of the NRL season. I hope that your team got up for you, and if not, there's always next week. So the topic of today's video is going to be about my top 5 most unlikely premiers. Now this is going to cover the New South Wales Rugby League era and the current NRL era. So without further ado, let's get into the video, shall we? So at number 5, I've picked Newtown. Now let's all jump back in our time machines and go to the year of 1943. Newtown won the minor premiership that year, but they faced a North Sydney side who had beaten them 3 times throughout the year. Twice in the regular season and once in the final series. So North Sydney went into the match as the overwhelming favourite, despite the fact that Newtown had won the minor premiership. North Sydney were captain coached by the great Frank Hyde, and Newtown were led out by their legend Frank Bumper Farrell. So in the grand final itself, Newtown just totally belted North Sydney all over the park. They resorted to doing a short kicking game, which cut out the fullback and the wing for North Sydney. The game was played in front of a ground record at the time at the Sydney Cricket Ground of 60,000 people. The reason for that being was it was during World War II and all ex and current servicemen got free entry into the ground, so the ground was rammed. I remember watching a video years later where Frank Hyde actually talks about the game, and he said, quote unquote, "they donkey licked us." So that's me pick for number 5. And an interesting note, that was Newtown's last ever grand final victory and North Sydney's last ever grand final appearance. So coming in at number 4, I've picked South Sydney. So let's jump in the time machine and go a bit forward to 1955. Now, South Sydney were the 1954 premiers, but after the midway point of the year, they were coming dead last. And there were no chance of making the finals from what the records at the time showed. But they ended up winning their last 9 games of the season to finish in the top 4 as it was back then. Along the way, Clive Churchill, their best player, suffered a broken arm against Manly. And going into the grand final against Newtown, they were also missing a couple of their other players. Now, Newtown and South had played the year before in the 1954 grand final. Newtown were the minor premiers that year as well, and they were up against South Sydney again. So going into the match, Newtown were the outright favourites. South Sydney were praised just for getting that far. And in the grand final, South Sydney won the match 12-11. And as I said before, what made the achievement even more remarkable was the fact that South had 3 or 4 of their best players out, including the future immortal of Clive Churchill. After the grand final, South went through a bit of a lull period. They didn't reach another grand final until 1965. And for Newtown, they never really recovered from losing that grand final. They reached one further grand final in 1981 against Parramatta, and 2 years later, as everyone knows, they exited the competition for financial and pressures from the New South Wales Rugby League board. So that's me pick for number 4, South Sydney 1955. Number 3, I've gone for Canterbury Bankstown 1995. So Canterbury Bankstown finished the regular season in 6th place that year, and they were up against the Manly side who won the minor premiership and had only lost 2 games for that entire year. So it was first versus 6 in the grand final. Canterbury had to win 3 sudden death matches just to make the grand final, including defeating the reigning premiers at the time, Canberra, in the preliminary final. So going into the grand final, everyone was tipping Manly. I remember actually watching the game as a little and I thought Manly were going to win, but in the end, Canterbury won 17 points to 4. Rod Silver, who was a Eastern Suburbs reject, Phil Gould didn't want him at Eastern Suburbs. He made the cross-season switch to over to Canterbury Bankstown. He ended up scoring the winning try. So I think that would, in today's game as well, that would be a massive boil over if you had the first place team against the sixth place team and the sixth place team won the competition. As we all know, Manly come out the next year, minor premiers again, won the premiership. Canterbury failed to defend their premiership, so I think they're the only team in the last 20 or 30 years that's finished where they did on the table and ended up winning the premiership. So they're my tip for number 3. Number 2, I've got Belmead 1969. So a bit of background on that. South Sydney were going for their 3rd premiership in a row. Belmead were going for their first premiership in 22 years. The match was played at the Sydney Cricket Grounds. Belmead had one of their best players and a promising young front rower who ended up becoming an immortal, Arthur Beetson. He was suspended from the grand final for a high tackle in the preliminary final. Not much hope was given to Belmead whatsoever, considering the fact that South Sydney had 9 internationals in their team. Now Belmead were no mugs themselves. They had some good players, but on paper everyone picked South Sydney. Going into the match, from the reports I've read, the head coach of Belmead, Leo Nosworthy, he brought out a tactic of let's slow down the play, and it became the famous stop and go play where whenever South Sydney had the ball or they were defending, Belmead would fake an injury or feign an injury to slow down the play, to disrupt the movement of the play, so South would get frustrated. They also implemented some other time-wasting tactics. The South players on the field were trying to protest with the referee, and the referee said, "All this is perfectly legal. You can't do nothing about it." Belmead ended up winning the grand final 11 points to 2. At that time was one of the it actually was the biggest grand final boil over ever. It was Belmead's last premiership. As everyone knows, they merged with Western Suburbs in 2000, so that was their last premiership. South went on to win 1970 and 1971. But I'm pretty sure for all you South fans out there, if you actually read about the game and what Belmead did, you'd probably be thinking, well, that's karma for doing that in the grand final against us. So that's my pick for number 2. And for number 1, I've gone for the West Tigers 2005. Now, if you were watching Rugby League back in 2005, or if you're old enough to remember, West Tigers were coming 12th. I think it was round 16, they were coming 12th on the table, and they were about 1,000-1 to win the 2005 Premiership. So after round 16, they ended up winning 9 or 10 games in a row to finish 4th. Now, at that stage, Parramatta had finished as the minor premiers, St George had finished 2nd. So I remember at the time, everyone was predicting a Parramatta St George grand final. West Tigers had other ideas. They beat North Queensland in the first week of the finals by nearly 50 points. The next week they beat Brisbane by, I think, 30 points. And then they come up against St George, where they weren't expected to win that, despite winning the last 2 games. And they put St George to the sword to reach the grand final against North Queensland. Now, if you would have picked both of these teams to make the grand final that year, you'd be a millionaire, because everyone was picking St George and Parramatta. It wasn't the case. West Tigers went into the match. They ended up winning the game 30 points to 16 by memory. But now, when you look at their roster on paper, they had some decent first grade players. Scott Prince, Brett Hodgson, people like that. But they also had a lot of inexperienced players. They had a very young Robbie Farah, and they also had some other first graders that could do the job, but they weren't exactly test or origin players, so to speak. So when you look at their squad and you compare it against other squads at the time, their squad was very, it wasn't as good as the other ones. And for them to win the Premiership, especially where they come from, being round 16, coming 12th on the table, to win 9 or 10 games in a row, and then just breeze through the finals like that and win the Premiership was phenomenal. We've come close a couple of times to seeing another West Tigers-esque repeat. We've seen Parramatta nearly do it in 2009. and North Queensland do it in 2017. But as of 2020, I think it's probably one of the greatest premiership runs ever. To win that many games in a row and then just breeze through the finals like that, and especially with the squad that they had, it makes them my most unlikely premier of all time. Well, in the New South Wales Rugby League in NRL history, all time. So, that's the conclusion of the video. If you like the video, please like, share and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you get emails when I do a new video. If you've got time, or if you've got Facebook, head over to Rugby League History. That's the page that I run on Facebook. It's doing quite well at the moment. I'll put a link in the description below. I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch us all later. Ta-ra.